Welcome to TeslaJoes, where we test everyday average Joe scenarios that you might encounter in your Tesla. Today on TeslaJoes, we're going to be tackling some DIY repair work on my Model S, and we are going to be replacing the steering column. We are replacing the steering column today because my turn signal indicator is broken. When it goes down to the left, it gets stuck. Replacing the steering column has quite a few steps. First, we need to do underhood storage, then 12-volt battery, airbag removal, steering wheel removal, steering column. All things said and done, this took me about an hour and 15 minutes, cost me about $100. Now that's all dependent on how much you get your steering column for. I was able to find it on eBay for about $100, and this saved me about $500 plus tax. Please follow these steps in the exact order that are specified in the Tesla manual. First, you're going to want to open your frunk or your front trunk. You're going to want to go inside your vehicle, turn off your climate control system. Then you're going to want to remember to roll down your driver's side window. Then you're going to want to close all your doors. And then we are going to release the storage unit or the front frunk storage area to access the 12-volt battery. Please remember to roll down your driver's side window. If you do not and you want to gain access to the vehicle, it'll be very difficult to get back in the vehicle. So please remember to roll down that window. In order to access the battery, we need to remove the underhood storage unit. Once again, this is for the dual motor. So what we're going to do is we're going to peel back the carpeting in that front trunk area on the top and also on the bottom. That will allow us to remove 4 bolts. And then we also need to disconnect the light in the frunk and also the release hatch in the frunk. Here we go, let's get started. First thing we're going to do is we're going to open up the hood of my Model S. Next, we're going to go into the vehicle, make sure that the climate control system is turned off. Then we're going to roll down the driver's side window. So let's talk tools. What type of tools are we going to need for today's procedure? Well, we're going to need a trim removal kit, 13mm socket, 8mm socket, and a 10mm socket. We need to gain access to the bolts on the top of our storage unit here and also on the bottom. The best tool that I found to do this is a trim removal tool. And I'll include a description in the link below to the set that I have. It works very well for all sorts of different types of procedures. So we were able to peel back the carpeting on the top part to expose the top 2 bolts. Now what I'm working on is the bottom part to expose the bottom 2 bolts and also the clips to the light for the frunk and also the release hatch for the frunk. It's time to grab our 8mm socket so that we can remove the front 2 bolts on the underhood storage unit. Here I'm just using a screwdriver with the socket attached to it. You can use a ratchet or whatever you deem necessary. The bolts aren't tightened in there very tight. They're actually tightened to 4 Nm per the spec manual, which is not very much at all. So they're very easy to remove. And I'm actually quite surprised that they don't jiggle loose while the car's driving. Now that we've got the front 2 bolts removed, we are going to move to the top 2 bolts, which is a 13mm socket. I'm going to save you the hassle of searching through all your socket wrenches for it, as you can see I'm doing here. Got a lot of different sizes, a lot of extensions, a lot of different things. But, oh, there we go. Oh wait, that's not going to work. I need the extension so that I can actually gain access to it. So make sure that you have an extension on your socket wrench as well so that it makes it easy to remove those top 2 bolts. Once again, 13mm bolts on the top there. They're not tightened in very tight either. 8 Newton meters, which is just under 6 foot-pounds. Now that we've removed all the bolts, we need to focus on the clips. There are 2 clips, one for the light in the frunk and one for the frunk release. The easiest way I found is to use your trim removal kit, tool, and or a screwdriver to unclip those. Now that we have all of the clips removed and all the bolts removed, it's time to remove the underhood storage unit. First I do is I take the carpet out of the underhood storage unit. Now what I'm doing is I'm investigating as to how this thing's actually attached. And there's actually lots of little clips that go around the outside of it that attach to the external trim that is sitting around it. So the first thing I want to do is remove this rubber grommet. that actually keeps water from getting. There's some of the clips that you can see, and they're tightened in there very tight, and they clip to the other parts of the plastic trim that you see. So after some experimentation, I found it was easiest to remove the rubber grommet altogether, and now those clips don't actually remove from that undercarriage, underhood storage bin by itself. The easiest way that I found to do is to remove the left and right storage panels that are next to that underhood storage unit next to the frunk. So what I'm doing here is I'm unscrewing the bolt, and this is just a hand tightened bolt that holds down that piece of trim on the right side of the vehicle that we're looking at here. And it's a really long bolt, so it takes a while to unscrew, but then you can just remove the trim piece like I did there, and the clips come right out of the under storage unit. Now we have one side removed. It's time to move on to the other side. We're going to undo the bolt, and then we're going to remove that panel as well. At this point, we're just about to complete step 5, which is the removal of the underhood storage unit, and then we will move on to step 6, which is disconnecting the 12-volt battery ground, and then we will disconnect the first responder loop, and then we will wait 2 minutes for the system to discharge before we touch anything. It's time to remove the underhood storage unit. Just give it a firm pull towards you, and the whole plastic unit is removed from the vehicle. Now we can see the inside of your Model S, and as you saw there, we have access to our 12-volt battery now. Here's a better look at what and where things are placed under the hood of your Model S. So on the right there we have our 12-volt battery. On the left we have a cooling reservoir. Once again, in this procedure, all that we're doing is replacing the battery or giving access to the battery, because lots of procedures require the disconnect of the 12-volt battery. The procedure also calls for the disconnect of the first responder loop. So that's the black cable that we see running across the metal there that I'm touching, and you can see the tag on the far left-hand side. So we also want to disconnect that. Now that we know where all the locations are that we need to disconnect, the negative ground that I'm touching there on the right-hand side, right now I'm trying to find the right size socket. Once again, it's a 10mm socket that will remove the parts to your 12-volt battery. So first we're going to go ahead and remove the ground to the battery. You always want to remove your ground first, and that is what the spec manual calls for as well. Once we have the ground removed, there you go, we can see that that's removed. We're going to pull the cap off the positive side, and we are going to simply remove the first responder loop. And that is that black cable that's running there. And you can see it's attached on the front part of your 12-volt battery. So you're going to ratchet that off or unscrew that. That is also a 10mm socket, and just simply lift it off. I always like to put the nut back on the bolt so that I don't misplace it. And there you have it. Now your 12-volt battery has been disconnected. Now that we have our 12-volt battery disconnected, it's time to remove our airbag. Please ensure that you wait 2 minutes after disconnecting your 12-volt battery before proceeding. The removal of the airbag is one of the simplest parts. We are simply going to remove 2 bolts, and that will release the airbag. In order to remove the airbag, we need one tool, a T25. You can also use a ratchet or a screwdriver attachment. In order to gain access to the T25 bolts, we need to rotate our steering wheel roughly 90 degrees. This will allow us to access those bolts. Now that our wheel's been rotated 90 degrees, let's have a look at those T25 bolts. There's one on top and one on the bottom. I found that the easiest way to remove these T25 bolts was to use a small ratchet to break the initial seal. And after the initial seal's been broken, then I took the T25 off of the ratchet and simply used my hand to loosen the rest of the bolt. Now it's important to keep in mind here that the bolt will not be completely removed. It will stay in the steering wheel. So don't worry about losing them, and don't worry about trying to completely remove them, because you'll be trying to unscrew it for a very long time. So just loosen them until they're completely loose, and that releases the airbag. Now that we have the airbag unscrewed, it's time to remove it. I found it very easy just to remove with my hand. However, if you're struggling, a trim removal tool might help. First thing that we need to do is rotate our wheel back 90 degrees. What this will do is give us access to the right spot. Now you can see where I'm putting my hands. This is what the Tesla manual recommends. And then you're simply going to pull with a consistent force towards you to pop that bottom part off. And then next you can pop off the right side and the left side. Do those individually. Now that we've got the airbag taken off of the steering wheel, we do need to release two clips that are behind the airbag that are attached to the steering column. We have a brown clip that's on the left-hand side, and we have a yellow clip that's on the right-hand side. The steering wheel is labeled on the yellow side. It's hard to see in my video here, but so if you do forget the yellow's on the right, you will see it labeled on the steering wheel. Now we need to remove the two clips. These clips can be a tad bit frustrating. However, after a little bit of experimentation, I was able to find that the easiest way to remove them was with a trim removal tool and or a screwdriver. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to have both the top and the bottom of the clip pressed in at the same time. So you're going to want to use two hands here, and once you get them both unclipped, you can see the clip comes right out of the steering column. So we've got the left one done there. Now we're going to move on to the right one, the yellow one. The top clip is already undone, and push in the bottom, and then we can remove that yellow clip as well. Now you've removed the airbag from your steering wheel. This is a look at what it looks like. Set this to the side. We won't need it until we reinstall it. Now that we have the airbag removed and out of the way, it's time to remove our steering wheel. In order to remove the steering wheel, you're going to use the 10mm hex. And this part was very difficult, so you're going to want to use either a breaker bar or an impact wrench. I had the best luck using an impact wrench. Ta-da! We finally arrived at the steering column, the actual part that we want to replace, which is pretty awesome. So what we're going to do here is we're going to jostle loose the steering column just by rotating it back and forth a little bit, and then we're going to disconnect one clip, and then we will have removed the steering column. So what we're doing here is we're jostling it back and forth 2 to 3 degrees as recommended per the manual. And there it is, it pops right off. Now we need to remove the single yellow clip that is attached to the steering column. I have a still image here of the yellow clip because it's got this little black clip on it as well. And that black clip is like a clip lock. So what you want to do is move that black clip towards you or towards the bottom of the screen from this orientation. That will give you access to the yellow clip. Once this yellow clip is removed, our steering column will be free. Alright, we've removed the broken part. Now it's time to install our new steering column. The most important part about the steering column is the clock spring. The steering column is fairly straightforward to install. What you're going to want to do is make sure that you line it up properly. Make sure that your clock spring is between the two arrows, and that ensures that your wheel can spin back and forth. Now, what you want to do is you're going to just line it up, and then you're going to firmly push it in. And there are a few clips along the top there that when it's telescoping back and forth, there's that little vinyl and or leather piece that you're going to want to attach. You want to make sure everything's lined up once it's pushed on there. Our new steering column is in place. Now we need to move on to reinstalling the steering wheel. We're going to need a torque wrench to reinstall our steering wheel. We will be torquing it to 80 Newton meters, which is about 59 foot-pounds. When installing the steering wheel, it's important to notice the larger notch in the steering wheel and then the indicator or the mark on the steering shaft itself. These two items need to be lined up to ensure that your steering wheel is mounted correctly in terms of orientation to your wheels. So you're going to want to make sure that that's lined up. So take your time here and line up that large notch with the indicator on the steering shaft itself. Once we have our steering wheel lined up, It's time to reinstall the bolt. I first applied some Loctite because that's what was on the bolt originally. First I'm going to hand tighten with the 10mm hex, then I'm going to get out my torque wrench here, and I'm going to torque it to 59 foot-pounds or 80 newton meters. Now that our steering wheel is properly tightened down, it's time to reinstall our airbag. Everything will be done in the reverse order of the removal. First, we're going to want to install our two clips. As we recall, we have a yellow clip and then a brown clip. The yellow clip goes on the right hand side. So let's install that yellow clip. Very straightforward, just firmly press straight in and you'll hear it click. Then we move on to the left hand side, which is our brown clip. Again, same procedure here. Don't need to do anything special. Just push it straight in. Now that we have our clips in, let's get our airbag in place. The little tip here is to tilt the top of the airbag so that you can position it under the top lip of the steering wheel. Now once it's under that top edge, you'll feel that it's seated correctly. Now all that you need to do is apply some pressure. And applying that pressure just evenly, and then you're going to want to check all your edges. Make sure that you've got it in the correct place and it's all the way in. Now that we have our airbag in the correct position, it's time to turn our steering wheel 90 degrees once again so that we can access the T25 bolts on the back. Here's our T25s. First what I do is I hand tighten the T25s and then I move on to a ratchet to tighten them in, and it's 8 newton meters of torque. These bolts don't need a lot of torque, so make sure not to over tighten them. After these T25 bolts are tightened, we have completed our steering column replacement from the inside of the car's perspective. Now we need to go back to the outside and hook up our battery. Pull a first responder cable first and then hook up the negative. We're able to test that our steering column works. Here I'm testing the turn signal. As you can see, the indicator lights are working as designed. I also wanted to test the steering wheel control roller wheels, and you can see that the volume's working. Now that we know that everything's working and our steering column is in the correct place, it's time to reinstall our underhood storage or our frunk area of our vehicle. The install will be the exact opposite of the removal. First thing that you're going to want to do is make sure that the rubber grommet is installed correctly that has the two clips. One of those clips will be going to the light in the frunk and one will be going to the release hatch. Next you're going to line up the front two bolts to ensure that your frunk is installed properly. Let's get those two front clips in place. First the light, and then the trunk release. Now that we have our clips in place, we are ready to reinstall the plastic that goes around the frunk. We need to do the install correctly to ensure that the clips are in the correct place. And this takes a little bit of finagling to make sure that it's secured properly. First, install the plastic piece that's closest to the windshield. After we've installed this piece, it'll be time to tighten down the top two bolts or the bolts closest to the windshield. Make sure not to over tighten these bolts, they're just into plastic. Now that we have the bolts tightened closest to the windshield, time to move on to the two bolts near the bumper of the vehicle. Once again, be careful not to over tighten these bolts. Now that we have all of our bolts secured for our frunk, it's time to reinstall the plastic pieces. You can either start on the left hand side or the right hand side. Just keep in mind that you want the plastic piece to be inserted into the clips that surround that frunk housing. Don't forget to install the hand tightened bolts that have the rubber on the outside of them. They hold the plastic pieces in place, the left and right pieces. After installing the left and right plastic pieces, we only have one final step remaining. That is to install the rubber grommet all the way around the front container. This rubber grommet is very important because it keeps water out of your frunk area. So take your time and make sure that you install this part correctly. I found the trim removal tool to be very useful when installing this rubber grommet. So the rubber grommet, what it does is it clips to the hard plastic that's underneath the carpet, but you also need to ensure that your carpet's lifted up enough so there's a little gap that you can slide the carpet into that's between the rubber grommet and the plastic. So that's where the trim removal tool comes in handy. Close your hood and you're all done. Haha, yes! we're all done. Took about an hour and 15 minutes, and we saved ourselves about $550. If I can do this, you can too. Thanks for watching TeslaJoes today in our DIY section of how to replace a steering column on your Model S. Follow us at TeslaJoes. Please like and subscribe and share our videos. More content coming shortly.